functions at SPH Media, bringing in a customer-focused, audience-centric, and product-thinking approach. He will share with us nuggets of his learnings today as SPH Media forges ahead in the digital media transformation journey. Gaurav joins us today from Singapore. Hi, Gaurav. It's great to have you with us today.
Hi, Arpan. Thank you so much. I'm 2.5 hours ahead, so I should be wishing all of you good afternoon. But I'm aware that folks may be joining in from different time zones. So wherever you are, I hope you're all having a great day. Let me share my screen now so that you're all able to see my slides. And, like Arpan said, there's no magic or there are no secrets that I'm going to be sharing today. I think we are all in the midst of the transformation journey and the challenges that the media space is facing. These are just some of the things that we have done at Singapore Press Holdings, now rebranded as SPH Media Limited. And I thought I'll just share some of those stories. Maybe there's something for you to pick up and learn from there. And maybe there's something for me to pick up and learn from the conversations that we'll have. So just a quick background, I have out and out been in technology sector. My formative years were spent doing engineering as an undergraduate and doing machine learning and natural language processing during my post-graduation. And I've moved from semiconductor industry to creative design industry in Adobe to engineering design industry in Autodesk, finally to transportation business in Grab, and 4 years ago at Singapore Press Holdings as their chief product officer. The one thing that had stayed common across this journey was growth mindset and a very rigorous customer focus. And you will see some of the organizations have shipped tools that we use on a daily basis, and that's the thinking that I thought I would bring to Singapore Press Holdings and see if that works. All right. For those who are not familiar with SPH, we are based in Singapore. We have 8 different newspapers which are published in 4 languages: English, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese. And there are also radio stations, 5 radio stations that are housed by SPH Media, and we're doing pretty okay so far in terms of our digital circulation and also our monthly TVs. But there's a lot of room for us to grow and do things in the right way. And so that's where I want to begin actually. With my journey and with the journey that we took. And I believe that any transformation journey must begin with first acceptance that we are transforming and that we need transformation, and also some form of recalibration. You must be able to ascertain where we are and where you want to get to. Because if you can't articulate the future that you want to get to, it'll be really hard for you to chart out steps on how to get there. And I think that's where it's really important that not only on this journey do you empower your employees, engage your customers, build new products, and optimize your operations, but it is equally essential to be extremely strategic, intentional, and systematic about it. You have to focus your teams on the end outcome and on the mission that you want to achieve. So I think the very first thing each one of us who's on a similar journey must ask ourselves, do our teams look towards an end outcome or a common mission that the entire organization can chart towards? I talked about recalibration. It was particularly important for me because I joined SPH from a high growth startup, which was Grab. And we had just completed Uber's acquisition in Southeast Asia region. So it was really essential for me to come into the organization and not only recalibrate myself and my expectations with how a traditional media organization functions, but also tell myself and remind myself that, hey, slow pace of transformation can let bad habits slide. And so therefore, it is now my job to make sure that I don't let those bad habits come on to me. Instead, I identify those bad habits in the various parts of the organization, and then we together go towards solving those problems. And and the one thing that I did and I brought over from my technology company experience is just listen, and be in the ground, be on the ground in the trenches, listening to what your teams are saying, listening to the problems they are facing, identifying the things that are going well, identifying things that can be done better. And trust me, what you would learn on the floor is invaluable. A lot of times, senior leaders get stuck in ivory towers, and we do a lot of strategic thinking. But you wouldn't believe, you would be surprised that when you step and spend time with your teams, your engineers, your editors, your journalists on the ground, they will throw up diamonds for you, which you can then structure and ship products that customers will love. So that's the first learning I had. Listen very effectively to your teams by being approachable. And in psychology, there is this concept that with acceptance and listening comes the openness of mind and senses to call out what's holding us back. And that's exactly what we need to do. Unless your entire organization believes, including you as leaders and those who are not in the leadership team in today's audience, you yourself, if you are not bought into the idea that we need to change, then no matter how much effort you make, things will slip away. So keep that in mind. The next thing is you could replace organization with a team, but it is important that you establish some principles of working after you've identified where you want to get to and change the narrative of the organization towards it. Now, if you don't have influence over the entire organization, start with your own team. So customer-centric, audience-centric, structured, analytical approach, no matter what your principles are, you keep those principles and start incorporating them in your team, in your team, and that's how I did. And in that way, we established a few principles or tenets that would help us build products that customers love. And those are just three. And this is not rocket science. You may have heard and followed some of these principles before, but the key is that you want to build the right product, and you can't build the right product unless you know who your customer is, which brings in the customer focus, and why you're writing or why you're building that product, which is the end outcome. Some people use frameworks, jobs to be done. Some people use frameworks, outcomes based learning. Some people use OKRs to track how you're doing. But essentially, they are answering the same question. Why are you doing this? What pain point are you solving? And in that process, try to be as data informed as possible. You must make sure that your teams have some measurable metrics to shoot towards to achieve the goals or the outcomes that you have set your organization for. And if you are collecting data, if you have set up teams such as a data science team, Arpan has set up an AI team within his organization. How do you harness and predict from that data, and not only rely on lagging indicators, which you would get from analytics, but also rely on some leading indicators? And how do you do that? You do that by iterating, by running experiments ruthlessly. You fail early, you test and learn, and then you iterate. Yes, some people are not comfortable with the word failure, with the phrase fail early, but you know what I mean. What I mean is you go to market quickly, get feedback from your customers as early as possible as you can, and then you A/B test, you course correct. Yeah, let me move on. There's a question in my, or there's a clarification in my mind. I hope some of you pick that clarification and ask me in the follow-up questions. Okay, so what does this process really look like from a product and design team's perspective? Basically splitting the work that you do into two parts. The first part is discover what is the right thing to do, and then focus on delivering the thing in the right fashion. Um, a lot of work in media space, I realized, happened ad hoc. There's an event happening and we need to put up a portal quickly. Many people ask me that we really don't have the time to discover and do things right. And I always go back to them that, hey, it doesn't take a lot of time to sit down, take a step back and ask yourself that what problems are we trying to solve by building that new portal, for instance. What are the needs of my customers, and how do I measure that traffic on this portal, or acceptance of this portal in with your target segment, is going to be there or not. You don't want to be putting up content, or you don't want to be putting up technology that nobody is going to use. The next, if it is a long-term or slightly medium-term initiative that you're working on, is to validate it, identify your hypotheses, and experiment the riskiest assumptions. And eventually you build it. This is the typical workflow you would see in how many technology teams function. But if you were to take away two key things, even if you don't want to go through that double diamond cycle of operations, is you must know who's your customer, what are their needs, what are their limitations, what are their possibilities, what environment do they work in, and at the end of the day, we are in the business of making your customers succeed. In media and journalism space, you want to inform them and you want to make sure that they listen to you because you're trustworthy, right? If there's nobody consuming our content, then it's really hard for us to justify our existence, whether we are doing well or not. And so in that process, how product and design teams function, how product managers and designers function, and is that um, is very similar to how in media space journalists trash out stories, which is spend time understanding what your customers need and want. Go into that story, do ethnographic research, do contextual inquiry, be present there, back your analysis with user interviews, with surveys and secondary research. And one additional thing that design teams do is build empathy maps. And we can talk about it in detail if we get to it. The second thing that you must take away is why. And I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but if you do not know why you're writing some piece of content or why you're building a particular portal, what outcome it will achieve, then there's a high chance that it will be wasted effort. And that's what we are trying to avoid in most organizations, trying to maximize the probability of our success. So clearly define the problems from the symptoms that you mostly hear. It's like you become a doctor yourself. And fever is a symptom, but what is the underlying problem that is causing that fever is what you want to solve for. And so don't jump to solutions. Typically, product managers and designers are hypotheses driven, and they test the assumption. You test a solution, and then if you realize that the solution is not working, you sunset it, you kill it, and then you move on to the next solution. And in that entire process, uh, the circle comes back to knowing what your business model is, knowing what your North Star targets are, knowing what which direction the company wants to get into. And then as a team or as an organization, sitting together and identifying some measurable metrics. If your organization doesn't have that metrics, then I would recommend that you start making team level metrics and then show that tracking those metrics got you growth, and then the entire organization will follow. It's a lot like be the example, demonstrate what you want the organization to be by emulating and doing those things yourself. Have a business plan or strategy and make sure that there's sufficient backing for why you want to do what. And we talked about being data driven and data informed. You can go into these slides, some of these techniques, when you get the slide deck later. But the key point I'm making here is that a lot of times we build products or we build capabilities simply because one of our competitor has done that. Somebody would say, hey, New York Times has launched recipes, let us also do it. Or some capability that is working on Wall Street Journal, we should also build it. I think the key to realize is that, does it make sense for your audience? By all means, take inspiration. I'm not saying that things that may have worked out for one organization may not work for you, but you must substantiate that by making sure that your audience is different from their audience. Your audience is your own audience. Their tastes, their likings, and their functionalities will be different. So if you can hyper localize that same capability that worked for another organization and you want to emulate it, then contextualize it to your audience. The other problem I typically see with engineering teams is that we come up with capabilities and we try and retrofit it to a use case. While that will mostly be the case, but if you try and avoid it, you would be blessed by your customers. Many a time you would notice that all of us are in a room, or maybe somebody dreamt of an idea, and and that person is senior enough in the organization, he comes and tells you, let's do that. So don't just run after that idea. Be bold to ask those questions. Why is this idea? Why do you think it will work? In what context it will work? What problems are you trying to solve? And do you also have an idea of how the user will experience it? What will be the customer journey? And ask those questions to yourself and also to whoever is bringing that idea to you. And so get rid of that habit of jumping straight to solutions, and which comes down always to asking the question why. Why are we doing this, and who are we doing this for? To the product managers in the audience who may be facing this, or are responsible for creating new product features and capabilities in media organizations, my only advice would you that be like a broken record. You will have to tailor your message to different audiences. You will have to champion your cause with empathy and also humility. Humility to understand the constraints that the editorial team runs with. Humility to understand the constraints that your engineering team faces on a daily basis. Your commercial team faces on a daily basis. And educate, like when I came into SPH, I had to do a lot of education of what product design is, what product management is. You do that without judging, and you will realize that when you work together in a team that is married to a common purpose, together you will do wonders. Okay. And I covered this slide that you have as product and design people, you have to work with various stakeholders across tech, strategy, legal, editorial. You tailor your message and practice being a storyteller, practice being outcome driven, practice being data backed. So I think I gave you a lot of things to do, but how did we do it in SPH? I'd like to talk through some examples so that that some of the nuggets that I have shared so far with you are not just textual or academic, but can seriously work if you apply these to your own work. So we started with first recognizing that the country that we are based in, Singapore, is diverse, and that it's diverse in the sense that it's multicultural. It has and multilingual, and so therefore any products that we come up with need to be extremely hyperlocal. And actually, we also accepted the fact that we are in a two-sided network of hyperlocality. We want to bring subscribers who buy our subscription and pass through the paywall but we also want to build advertisers. And why it is a network effect? It's simply because the more good quality subscribers you bring in, the better you will be able to pitch to your advertisers that, hey, we have eyeballs which will help you and us grow together by monetizing our content. So with that acceptance, here are a few examples that I would like to share with you. Suresh and Arpan, are we doing okay on time?
Yes, Gaurav, we are good with time.
Okay, great. So here is one product that we launched and became a blockbuster success for us. And this product is nothing new. I mean, many of us have e-papers, but we realized that in Singapore, most of our printed publications were bought by majority of the people who were buying the printed paper were in the older demographic. And we gave ourselves two objectives. How do we move our older demographic to digital? That's one, because the entire country needs to be digitized. And second, how do we still give them the feel of turning a newspaper? And when we did that, we launched a product which actually repurposed our e-paper, and we designed an experience around it that made a printed paper accessible on a large 10-inch tablet, for which we actually struck a partnership with one of our partners, Samsung. And we wouldn't have been able to think of this innovation if we had not spent time to understand what our elder demographic really wanted. And we came up with the hypotheses. We tested it with data and research, and then we launched it. We didn't even know whether it will become successful. So we started with one publication. And after we saw that that publication was getting traction, then we onboarded all the other publications and created pipelines and structures within the organization to do that. The next example I want to talk to you about is checkout flow. We are in the business of subscriptions, and if when your reader has decided to take out his or her wallet and pay you the money to subscribe, you want to make sure that that happens fairly quickly. We realized that our checkout process was not very efficient. We did our funnel analysis. We made sure that we revamped this entire journey and reduced it to just 3 steps, where we focused on improving the discovery of our publications and then highlighting which key packages work well for the publication that our customer is interested in, and then a quick checkout flow. We also realized that, hey, a lot of our readers are listening to podcasts, and audio is becoming a method of telling stories. And so we onboarded news onto Google devices, where you could just say, hey Google, what is the latest news? And Google would read you news from the Straits Times. We hacked it actually. As I was telling you, we have radio stations, and at the top of every hour, the radio DJ would give you a summary of the latest news. So we extracted those segments, which were like 2-minute, 3-minute segments, and headlines were played, and we linked them to our Google devices. We realized that we were sitting on a gold mine of copyrighted images, especially relevant for our context, because the creative design agencies are always looking for pictures. And when they go to Getty Images or any other public photo repository, they were always finding Western faces. And here we were sitting on a large archive of images with Southeast Asian faces and doing nothing with it. So we decided to launch a marketplace where not only could you buy these pictures from us, and some of these pictures are, have history of Singapore traced in them. You could not only buy those pictures, but also contribute. So it became a 2-sided marketplace where if you're a photographer and you can upload your pictures, and if someone buys them, we give you a revenue cut. We started focusing on habit forming capabilities, and And this is purely with the outcome of retention of subscribers in mind. But we also saw that it helped us gain new customers as well, where we launched gamification techniques, reward points, and contextualizing them. So if you read an article fully, you will get some reward points. And then after completing a streak, say coming back to our publications every day for the last 7 days, you will accumulate a reward which would help you redeem it with some goodie that you can reach out to our partners. So you see here in creating a capability for our subscribers, we were able to tap into our advertising partners also, and both of them benefit because the reward was given by some of our advertising partners.
So Gaurav, we have a few more minutes left for a couple of questions.
Sure. Okay. So I'll just wrap it up. So these are just some of the examples of how, when you apply some, these techniques that I just talked about in your real life, in your daily life, you can actually make needle moving impact to your business. And the one thing that I would like you to take away is that please don't build products just because you have an engineering team or someone, but make sure you build products only because there is a market for it, there's a customer for it, and that you can monetize it. It will get you to move out of your comfort zone. But who said fun was easy and rewarding? So magic will happen when you're outside your comfort zone. And with that, Arpan, I hand it back to you.
Very, very thoughtful and insightful presentation.
Thank you.
I want to go back to one of the points that you made. Why are we doing this from a product standpoint, right? And so much is happening in this ever evolving digital space, right? So as product teams, how do we prioritize? How do you prioritize? There is competition always doing something. One wants to catch up. There are internal milestones which the organization wants to. And then, of course, there is the product thinking, right? The continuous product thinking and product evolution. How do you prioritize?
There are two parts.
Gaurav, you can stop your screen now.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing. Give me a second. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a really great question, Arpan. And prioritization is key. It's it's bread and butter for a product manager. The way we did it is, number one, we first called out what our needle moving metrics are going to be. What is it that the organization wants to achieve? And by knowing what the organization wants to achieve, we created measurable metrics, majority of them. So we hooked ourselves to 4 key metrics in the organization. And then we developed an ROI framework. Now that's a very that's not a to the T framework, but it was an ROI framework that would force you to think about what impact will a particular initiative make in terms of number of subscriptions, or in terms of advertising revenue, or in terms of just making our teams more productive. And then what will be the effort to do this? In the beginning, we started with just man hours of effort and nothing else, no infrastructure cost, nothing. Just purely, if I were to deploy my existing resources, people and get them to refocus on another initiative, how many man hours would it take for them? And so that impact versus man hour calculation gave us a very rudimentary mathematical model of stacking, the various initiatives that we were running into. Of course, gut instinct comes in there. There are some strategic bets whose ROI may be low, but you still want to pursue them because you see that in future, if we don't start investing now, we will not know whether we'll succeed later or not. So we took cognizance of the fact that there are some things that will be very ROI driven, and there'll be a few initiatives which will be strategic bets. That's the process of just creating or stack ranking the backlog of items that you have, or the roadmap of things that you want to execute on. I think the second most critical thing in prioritization is making sure everybody agrees with that prioritization. So we set up a governance mechanism where product managers and editors together, as the digital editor and the product manager together would present to decision makers. These are the things, and this is the order in which we will start doing them. And if anybody has any problem, speak now or keep your peace. Having said that, we are working in an agile world, and news breaks or things happen without notice. So we set up the frequency of this governance meeting in such a way that if an emergency happens and you need to course correct, then not only do you course correct, but you also send out this communication of transparency to everybody else who may have cross dependencies on these teams. Many a time there are various different business units working with the same set of engineers, for instance. Now, if one squad deprioritizes something, what is the ramification on other squads is something that that we really had to keep in mind and build structures, processes, and principles around it. So that's how we used
very
to.
Interesting, very interesting. In fact, one of the and we saw that slide on stakeholder management, right? And one of the key stakeholders is the newsroom.
That's right.
So how are you synergizing? How are you helping the newsroom from a product standpoint? Is it always going and throwing numbers to them? Because they're not the number person. They're there to write great stories.
Right.
How do you help them?
So that's a great question, in the sense that, as you know, I came from a technology background, and if you search for product management or product managers or product thinking, you would typically see a Venn diagram, which is actually 3 circles. And let me just remind everybody, those 3 circles are business viability, technology feasibility, and customer empathy. Now that business viability typically in a tech firm is the commercial side of the house, the sales teams or the marketing teams, so on and so forth. We consciously made sure that what we call as business owner is not only the commercial teams but also the editorial teams. Now that's how the messaging is with the engineering and product teams. And so we align our org structures in such a way that in a squad, the people who are continuously represented and are creating and managing the roadmaps are not just product managers and engineering managers, but also editors. So this is how we tackled it from a process perspective. There is also a human element perspective here, and that human element perspective is empathy. One needs to understand what are the challenges of the newsroom to be able to tell them or make them empathize with the challenges that you as a product or engineering team will face. So one thing we did is we embed our product managers into the newsroom. Like when I joined SPH, I spent my first few months going through the motions of the morning meeting with sub-editors in deciding which stories to pick up, which stories to not pick up for the evening daily. And similarly, we got some of our editors to sit through Scrum meetings where they would see how product managers and engineers are prioritizing. And by just knowing how each function works, that element of empathy comes in. At the end of the day, we may be represented as editorial team or newsrooms or as product team and product managers. At the end of the day, we are all humans,
Absolutely.
And it's that understanding. And once each of us realizes the challenges the other person is facing, it leads you to an aha moment where why this person is pushing back, and you can jump straight to resolving the issues or the fears because of which this person is pushing back on what you want to do, what you want to achieve.
And I think from a technology standpoint, tools, innovations, I think there's a lot of areas for synergy, right?
That's right.
But thank you, Gaurav. I think that's all we have time for today. I request the audience, if there are questions for Gaurav, please write to him. Thank you once again, Gaurav. Thank you, audience. You can go back to the timeline for joining the next session. Over to you, Suresh.
Thank you, Arpan, and thank you everybody for your time.